Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's vlog is going to be an Appalachian horror vlog. This region of America is absolutely beautiful and I think it makes a really great setting for a horror novel because of all of the folklore and tales and superstitions and just creepy stories about this area, yes, but also because it is vastly expansive. It's very much an untamed part of the wilderness when you're going through the Appalachian mountains, and there's something very creepy about bad things happening in such a beautiful place. And then of course when we have nature horror, there's just something so horrific about being alone in nature. So I do have 3 horror books, horror, thriller, little bit of fantasy in there as well, that take place in this region of America, and I'm really excited to get to them. So gonna quickly introduce those and then we'll get into the vlog. The first book is Nowhere by Allison Gunn, and this is supposed to be for fans of The Outsider by Stephen King. This year I have been really into mysteries, and in particular mysteries with a little bit of a paranormal spin to them. So we are following a police officer, I believe, a sheriff of a very small town whose children start going missing. This one is supposed to be a haunting family saga dealing with Appalachian folklore. So this is the first book. We also have, this one is a horror fantasy, Motheater by Linda H. Codega, and this one has to deal with witchcraft, I believe, and a war for nature against a witchy nature magical side, and then an industrialized side of a conflict. So I don't know how horror this one will be, but I have seen it talked about as a horror fantasy, so I feel like it works well in this vlog. And then last but not least, I'll be reading Jackal by Erin E. Adams. This is the book that I'm actually starting off this vlog with, and it's about a young black girl who goes missing in the woods outside her white Rust Belt town. But she's not the first, and she may not be the last. There are tons of blurbs for this one that make it feel like this is going to be the perfect mystery horror for me. One says, I read this thriller that is Get Out meets The Vanishing Half in one night. This horror novel is a Shirley Jackson Award nominee and a Bram Stoker Award finalist, and I'm very intrigued to dive into this one. So I'm gonna go get to reading Jackal, and I will check back in later with a reading update. So I am now about 30% of the way through Jackal, and I am really enjoying this one so far. This one is very fast-paced, shorter chapters, very readable, and one of the blurbs for this book says that they couldn't put it down. They read it in a single sitting, and I can definitely see why. I think if I hadn't have started it so late last night, that I definitely could have really sped through this one, but 30% of the way, so far so good. So in this book, we are following main character Liz, and she is very reluctantly coming back to her hometown. Liz is black, and she was one of the only black children, one of the only black families to grow up in this very small mining community that is predominantly white. She doesn't have the best memories of this town. When she graduated, she left, hoping to never really come back, but her best friend is getting married, and so she comes back to be there for her best friend. Liz is happy for her friend, is preparing for just kind of an awkward and uncomfortable weekend that is going to be potentially full of awkward small talk as people try to reconnect with her, and then some maybe macro or micro aggressions as well. But the wedding goes beautifully. She's really enjoying the reception with her best friend and just enjoying the wedding when unfortunately her best friend's daughter steps into the woods and disappears. This kicks off a frantic missing person search as a wonderful wedding, one of the best days of this woman's life, turns into one of the worst as her daughter is missing and people are trying to find her. However, Caroline, the young girl, is not the only young girl to have disappeared from this small town throughout the years, and Caroline is half black, and she is not the only black child to have gone missing during the time that Liz grew up in this town and also throughout this town's history. So we're primarily following Liz, but we also get interstitials throughout of different black children black girls who go missing in the woods. And there is something that's just not quite right. So 30% of the way in, we've gotten the prologue is actually from the 1980s, and then we get one in the 2000s when Liz was actually a student and knew the girl who went missing, and we're seeing that these disappearances are brushed off as these girls go into the woods, they get lost, and they die of the elements, of accidents, of natural causes. But this is a pattern that has been going on for a while, and Liz seemingly has her own dark past with the woods. She's terrified of the woods. She's terrified of the woods even before Caroline goes missing. So she is trying to find her best friend's daughter and also kind of grapple with this very dark history of the woods surrounding this town. Very eerie setting, very intriguing setup, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm going to go get to reading. I'll check back in later with another update. So I finished Jackal and I really enjoyed this one. This is definitely, I would slot this into a horror with a thriller pace, because I think just based on some of the lower reviews for this one, if you are going into it expecting a thriller, I think you're really not going to like the paranormal elements of this one. So in those aspects, it's definitely more on the horror side, but the pacing and the plot twists and turns and just like the plot beats, it does feel very much like a thriller, very fast paced, very speedy. It's very easy to keep reading. It's got shorter chapters, and a lot of those chapters end on a cliffhanger, which makes you want to keep reading. So I really enjoyed this. Not to say that if you're a thriller reader, you wouldn't like this one, but just know going in that it is very paranormal. And I think it's pretty obvious that it's paranormal from the jump, because we are not following only Liz, but we're also getting these interstitials, these little chapters of the different victims throughout the decades, and it's very clear not exactly what is going on, but something paranormal is going on. It talks about Appalachian folklore, such as if you see something out of the corner of your eye, if you hear something, say your name, no you didn't, keep walking and ignore it, and just different lore about shadows and things in the woods. So I did really enjoy this one, and there was an author's note at the end that this is actually inspired by the author's own journey with her hometown, which is the same hometown that is in this book. So I thought that added a lot to this story and just the process that Liz as a protagonist went through. It seems like this is a very personal book for this author, and I really enjoyed it. I will definitely be picking up another book by this author. I will say, just like a tiny little critique, sometimes I felt like I didn't get Liz as a character. Like sometimes I felt like her character was not necessarily one that was like central to the focus of the story. However, I feel like that's kind of intentional, because she is the one who is trying to bring justice to these girls who went missing and disappeared and never got justice. So I did like that we got so much about those girls throughout the years from the 1920s to present day, just seeing all of these young women, girls, they're all high school-ish, middle school to high school aged young Black girls who just went missing from this small town, and they just did not receive the justice that they were deserved, and not even justice, but they didn't even receive like the kind of investigation that they deserved. So I thought that was probably why I felt like Liz kind of took the back seat to some of the mystery of what was happening, but I think that was probably a little bit of an intentional choice. I appreciated the different explorations of race in here when it comes to this small town, and when it comes to when someone goes missing, what a perfect victim looks like, and the biases in when it comes to runaway kids or children that go missing, and who is determined to be in danger, who's determined to just to be a runaway, and all of that. I thought this book balanced it really well with a very fast-paced, intense paranormal mystery. This book definitely gave creepy forest vibes. You could tell that the author grew up in this area, and the forest itself really felt like a character, not just a setting, but a character in this story. So I really enjoyed this one. And now we are moving on to the next book, and that would be Motheater by Linda H. Codega. And this one is a fantasy horror blend, and I just, first of all, I love this cover. I loved Jackal's cover as well. All the covers in this vlog just have really striking covers in different ways, I feel. But this one, like I said, is a fantasy. It's a startling and nuanced queer fantasy set amid the beauty of the Appalachian Mountains. The last witch of the ridge and a newcomer investigating the coal industry must choose sides in a clash between nature and development that's been over 100 years coming. And there's a blurb on the back that says, "Nature won't be subdued forever. Which side are you on?" So Jackal was a faster paced thriller horror hybrid. This is a fantasy horror hybrid, and it is significantly thicker. So I think this one will probably be a little slower paced than my last read, but definitely so excited to dive into this one, see what kind of story this one brings. So I am about 50% of the way through Motheater, and it's going okay so far. This one definitely, I feel like I can see the horror elements, the darker elements of this one, but I would pretty much cement it firmly in the fantasy camp with some horror, some darker elements, as opposed to like a 50-50 blend of horror and fantasy, but it is going well so far. I think part of the reason why I expected this to be a horror fantasy is because the blurbs on the back, we have Rory Power, Gretchen Felker Martin, Andrew Joseph White. Those are all horror authors. And then we also have some fantasy authors like Hester Fox and Kay Ankrum. So I think I was just expecting more of those horror elements because of all of the horror authors blurbing this one. There's definitely been some scenes, especially one in a church, that have been very creepy and very eerie, and the magic system here is a little bit dark. I would say it's like a very dark, like fairy tale-ish sort of style. So think like Grimm's fairy tales, the traditional dark ones, like they're fairy tales. There's a lot of magic happening here, but there's also some very dark undertones. So I am enjoying this one so far. It does feel just a little bit on the longer side. This is over 400 pages, and this is a book, while I am enjoying my time with it, it does feel already like it's just a little bit long. So this book starts off with our main character, Benny, and she finds a woman floating down the river. She looks to be dead or nearly dying. She pulls her out, and she is going to go get her help when the woman wakes up and starts telling some very interesting tales, talking about how she is the witch of the mountain and she's from a long time ago, a century ago. Benny thinks that this is just a lot of babbling, a lot of rambling, struggling, but she's trying to help out this stranger. But as strange coincidences, little brushes of magic start happening, Benny starts believing this stranger, who she calls Motheater, and she believes her. She starts to believe her that she is actually a witch that has been imprisoned inside a mountain for about a century. Rather than be scared by this magic, Benny is really intrigued because ever since her best friend died, her best friend was a part of this mining company that was mining on the mountain. Ever since her friend died mysteriously in an incident surrounding her place of employment, she has been searching for a way to shut this mining operation down. And now that she has a witch who is connected to the mountain and who also really does not agree with and wants to stop the forces of industry from destroying nature, she thinks that she might have a shot at doing so. So we are following these two women in the present day as they're trying to figure out how to stop this industry from destroying this mountain, and also figure out the strange series of deaths and disappearances that have happened at this mining company. So we're getting that point of view. We also get a point of view of Motheater herself, and this point of view takes place right after the American Civil War, and we get Motheater, who we discover is called Hester, and she is the witch of the mountain. She protects the people in the surrounding town, helps them thrive in Appalachia, and she is trying to stop the very first companies of industry, mining companies, and all of that are trying to move in on this mountain, and Esther is trying to stop them. So we go back and forth between those two stories as these women are trying very desperately to save their homes, to protect and preserve nature and stop these things from happening, things like pipelines, things like mining, without figuring out like if it's a good place to mine or not. So they're both trying to stop the same thing. It's the same fight, just about a century in difference, and I think that's where it's losing me a little bit, because it's not so much the fact that we are getting two different timelines. I'm enjoying them both pretty equally, I would say, but when we flash back to the modern timelines, Benny has no idea like Motheater's name, where she comes from. She starts getting little clues here and there because Esther, or Motheater, has amnesia, and I don't really love that, particularly when we as the reader know a lot more than other characters. So Benny does not know as much about Motheater. Motheater doesn't know as much about Motheater as we the reader do, because we are getting her backstory. So that's a little bit frustrating for this one. It's just frustrating that we the reader have a lot of the answers, and we are learning about Esther's life, and then we'll flash back and she'll be called Motheater again and be really frustrated at not being able to remember what happened to her as well. These two women, Esther and Benny, also have the same fight. They're fighting for the same things, only a century apart. So a lot of the conversations in here that they have with different villagers, different townspeople, different people who are trying to push this industry and industrial progress, they feel very similar or the same. So it feels just a little bit repetitive in those ways. I know it's trying to show that this is the same fight that has been going on for generations and for centuries, the push and pull between nature and industry, but it is feeling a little bit repetitive when coupled with the way that we as the reader just know so much more than the characters in the modern day. The writing in here is really beautiful though, and you're really getting a sense for this mountain, and getting a sense for this mountain as its own character alongside the town and the characters that we are following. So I am enjoying those aspects, and I'm very curious to see in the latter half of this book how Benny and Motheater are going to try and make their stand. So I finished Motheater by Linda H. Codega, and this one ended up just being okay, a pretty middle of the road read for me. The things that I had noticed around the 50% mark continued throughout this entire book, and I did like the writing. The writing style was really beautiful, and especially in the throwback chapters, the chapters that were following Esther in the century before the Benny chapters take place, I thought thought that writing fit so perfectly with that story, and I liked the historical journey, the historical chapters of this book better than the ones in modern day, just for a variety of reasons. Number one, it just felt like Benny and Esther just had the same sort of trajectory and goals and what they wanted to do, and the conversations that they had with the people around them, especially in the first part of this book, just felt very repetitive because their stories so closely mirrored each other. The second thing that I didn't really love about this book is the fact that our main character, Motheater, or Esther as she's known in her point of view chapters, but she's called Motheater in the present day because she has amnesia. She doesn't know what has happened to her, and that is not something that I automatically don't like in a book. Characters can experience amnesia and memory loss. That's not automatically something that I don't like in a book. However, when done this way, we as the readers knew everything about Esther. We knew her name, we knew what happened to her, we just had all of the information about her before the characters Motheater and Benny did. So while they were searching for answers, searching for what Motheater, who she was, where she came from, what her story was, we already knew that. We even knew her real name, which was Esther, which comes in at the very end when she finally reclaims her name, and that would have been more impactful had we not already known it from about page 50 or so. So that journey of discovery that we as the readers already know, plus a romance that was featured pretty heavily in Benny's chapters between Benny and Motheater, really took away a sense of urgency. There is a big danger looming over the characters in the present day, but because they're spending so much time getting to know Motheater / Esther, who she is, where she came from, what is going on with her in the mountain, and how she is connected, because we are focusing so much on that, we are not focusing enough time. There's not enough momentum. There's not enough high stakes in this one. There's something so bad that is going to happen that is going to be just a natural disaster pretty much on that scale, on that level, and I never felt those high stakes except in the last 50 pages of this book. So I just think some of the pacing was a little off. While I do appreciate both in the modern day chapters and then also in the chapters from the post-Civil War period, there was some great queer representation in here that was done really seamlessly throughout both points of view. So I did really appreciate that. However, I just felt like the romance was really kind of shoehorned in, and again, just took away some of the plot momentum. I wanted to know more about the witchcraft and the mountain and all of these dangers going on, and a lot of the chapters, especially the Benny chapters, were so focused on Benny falling for Motheater, and then also Benny introducing Motheater to things like hamburgers and pizza and running water and things like that, which can be really amusing for a chapter or so to really sell the idea that Motheater is from a different time. Obviously, if you wake up after a century-long sleep, then you are going to be very startled and shocked about the state of the world and all of the advancements. However, it just felt like we kept getting scenes like that and not enough scenes actually trying to stop this evil from happening. So I did enjoy it. I didn't hate it. I just had all of those things running alongside my enjoyment of the story that just made this kind of middle of the road for me. I think I would have enjoyed this a whole lot more had it just been historical chapters and Esther's point of view. I just felt like those chapters were so much stronger than the ones that took place in the present day, and the writing style, the dreamy, purpley prose writing style, worked a lot better for those historical chapters than the ones taken place in the modern day. I also just wanted more dark and creepy magic. There were some tense, creepy, scary scenes in here. I mentioned one involving a church that still I think is one of the best scenes in this book, one of the scariest. This is marketed as horror fantasy, and I looked on Storygraph. It's actually not tagged as horror in Storygraph, but then I went to Goodreads. It's still genre tagged as horror, so just kind of change your expectations, I guess, if you go into this one. This is a lighter fantasy. The only fantasy elements are the witchcraft, and it takes place like in our world. And although those fantasy elements could get a little dark sometimes, I wouldn't necessarily call this a horror novel. So if you like a darker sort of fantasy magic system that takes place present day, also has historical aspects, but where the only fantastical elements are the magic and nothing else, takes place in our world. And if you want a book that does feature a strong queer romance, then you might like this one more than I did. I will say this book is absolutely beautiful. I love the cover. I do also like the chapter headers. The chapter headers each have a beautiful moth on it. I will say though, the grayscale for a lot of these pages probably could be an accessibility issue. I didn't have a big deal, a lot of trouble reading it, but you can see that the first couple of sentences or paragraph or so is a little bit dark and hard to read just based on that contrast. But overall, this is a very gorgeous book, and I just wish I liked it a little bit more. So we are moving on to the third and final book of this vlog, and that would be Nowhere by Allison Gunn. I have heard this comp titles. The comp titles for this one are The Mayor of Easttown, I believe, and The Outsider by Stephen King. I love The Outsider. I have not read or watched, I don't even know if it is a book or TV show or movie. I haven't read or watched the other comparison title, but The Outsider has me really intrigued. This is a shorter one. It's a missing persons mystery. We are following a series of disappearances in a small fundamentalist town and what one broken family must do to remain together as dark forces close in. So I'm gonna go get to reading this one. I'll check back in later with an update. So I am currently about 30% of the way into Nowhere. So far, so good. This book actually starts out with an author's note where the author talks about how personal of a story this is for her, and it also gives her a chance to go over some trigger warnings, some content warnings for this book. So if you are a type of person who needs content warnings, make sure you read the author's note before you dive into the prologue. But if you don't need any content warnings and you think that those are more of a spoiler, just go ahead and skip the author's note. I would say still read it at the end of this story, but you can go into the prologue, start reading it, and then come back and read the author's note, because I did really appreciate this. Seems like it is a very, very personal story for this writer, and it's dealing with some very, very difficult topics. So it's nice to know that these topics are being handled with such care. So we are primarily following one family in a very small Virginia town. This family has been through hell and back, and this book is going to be partly family saga drama, exploring the impacts that one horrific event can have on a family, as well as focusing on a horrific plot about dark, creepy, horrific things happening in this small town. We are primarily following the Kennons, and Rachel Kennon, the mother of the family, is the chief of police. It's a very small town, so it's a very small police force. It's pretty much just her and her deputy that she can rely on, along with 2 or 3 other part-time police officers. We also have her husband, Finn, who used to be a journalist, and now he is a freelance writer and takes care of their children, has more of a stay-at-home dad position. So these two, very fraught relationship dynamic. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but it really fractured in half because one night Finn was driving home with 2 of their children. He was under the influence and got into a crash and caused the death of their son Aiden. So after that, nothing has ever been the same. Rachel is grappling with guilt and not being able to trust her husband and the love for a son that has gone missing, because while he is presumed dead, the car crashed into a river, and all of this gets discussed in chapter 1. So these aren't necessarily spoilers spoilers, I wouldn't say, but the car goes into the river, so they've never recovered his body. So she's dealing with a lot of grief, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger at her husband for putting their children in this situation. Finn also grappling with a lot of self-hatred and guilt, and obviously trying to also struggle with being there, taking care of his two children that are remaining, one of which was also in that crash and also was deeply impacted by that, and also struggling with addiction and alcoholism. So things are not well at home. Obviously, the children, Lucy and Charlie, that are remaining also have a lot of grief that they need to deal with, their own problems that they're dealing with at school and with their friends as well. So it's a very fraught, very tense family dynamic, which only gets pushed to the boiling point when Rachel is just doing her duties one day and she discovers a horrifically mutilated body in the woods. And as bodies start piling up in this small town, it seems like no one is safe. This family has to grapple with staying together, coming together in the wake of such loss and such grief, and trying to be there for each other, while especially Rachel tries to figure out what is going on in her town and trying to keep not only her family but the town safe. This book's definitely had some creepy scenes happening in the forest. It almost gives a little tiny bit of Stranger Things vibes, just for the fact that we follow a lot of characters. Primarily, we've gotten the most chapter point of views from Rachel and her husband, but we also get one-offs of their children and then other children in this town. So in that way, it kind of explores the secret life that kids have, where adults don't realize that they understand as much as they do, and getting involved and going in the woods even if there is a great danger, and the riskiness and the bravery in that. So that plus the creepy forest elements are kind of reminding me a little bit of Stranger Things, in particular Charlie, one of Rachel and Finn's children. She is in 8th grade, so her and her friends, like, they just have discovered that a body was discovered in the woods that morning, and her friends go to smoke weed in the woods at night. So there's that realization that bad things are happening in your town, but you still feel like you can engage in normal behaviors, hang out with your friends, keep on going and keeping on trying to be a kid or a teen despite these awful things happening. So I do like those chapters. I like those chapters a little bit better than Rachel and Finn's point of view chapters, because totally understand, like, the death of a child and the situation in which their son died is really horrific and is going to splinter a family, even a family that was really tight-knit before this happened, which was not the case for them. I find them to be hard characters to read from the point of view, just because they are so mired in grief and self-hatred, and that can just be really hard to read about a main character and be in their headspace when they're coming from such an intense space of grief and loathing for themselves. So I am enjoying this one so far. It definitely has some very creepy horror elements, so I'm gonna keep reading, and I will check back in later with another reading update. So I finished Nowhere, and this book was delightfully creepy from beginning to end. This was exactly what I was looking for when I was looking for an Appalachian horror, with the forest and creepy things happening in a forest, a small isolated town where things quickly go from bad to worst. I really did enjoy this one. I know I mentioned in my last update that Rachel and Finn as like main characters were just a lot to read from, and not the best or most likable main characters, but they did, you know, they had some growth. They were easier. I don't know if I just got used to them, or they had like some more aspects to their characters. The characters were fleshed out and had some growth throughout the novel, but they were like less frustrating to read from as time went on. I will say I loved how this did, you know, we did focus on Rachel and Finn. They were the two main points of view, but we got chapters throughout several different people in the town, and as things got worse and worse in this town, I really appreciated getting to see those little snapshots of everything going on within the town. This was just a whole lot of fun, very graphic, very scary in terms of the scare factor. If you like creepy kid horror, I think you would really like this one. What I liked about this one is that a lot of small town horror, it seems like things are perfect before they get worse, but for this town, things are already like in a pressure cooker when it comes to the lack of support from other communities, and then of course Rachel and Finn themselves struggling through grief. So I did really like those aspects at the beginning when there is this body found in a just horrifically disturbed manner, and Rachel's trying to get help from other police forces. They just chalk it up to meth heads in the woods, and they won't send her resources, which may or may not have helped throughout this story. I'm not going to give too much away about what happens or like what the evil, like the nature of the evil is, but whether or not that would have helped, it does show the stress that Rachel is under from all sides with not getting help from her community. And as kids start to go missing, other kids, other people in the community start acting a little strange, a little weird. People start hearing things in the forest. This book was very visual in its horror and its scares, and for movie comp titles, I would say a little bit of Sinister, and then also a little bit of Jeepers Creepers. Not necessarily the plot or anything like that, but just the themes of things going wrong in the country. There is one inciting incident at the beginning of Jeepers Creepers that just feels like, okay, everything's kind of like inevitable, just one random happenstance encounter, something happens, and then just the whole series of events and the stories and the fates of the main character feel kind of sealed and set in stone from that very first interaction. So just like the creepy backwoodsy sort of country nature of those. Again, the evil in Jeepers Creepers and the evil in Nowhere, very different, but just kind of that sense of inevitability and just a chase, or the main characters trying to escape what feels like an inevitable evil. I really liked this one. I had a lot of fun. So overall, this vlog I think went really well for me. My least favorite was Motheater, but I think that's just because it ended up being a little bit of a different story than what I was expecting. If you do like a romance-centered story that dabbles in witchcraft but focuses mainly on like historical elements and real-world elements with that romance and character connection, I think you could probably end up liking this one a little bit more than me. I was just hoping for a little more horror and a little more witchiness throughout the story. And then my second favorite, I think, would have to be Jackal. It's really close between Jackal and Nowhere. I really liked Jackal and the thriller pace of this horror novel, and it was definitely creepy and sad and bittersweet at moments with a great mystery throughout. But I just think that just in terms of my reading preferences, Nowhere has to be my favorite because the scares in here were very scary. There were a lot of very creepy moments, and I really like a good creepy little kid horror. So if you like small town horror surrounded by a forest, things going wrong in a small town with some creepy kids, then I would recommend you pick up Nowhere. But overall, great time with this vlog. Definitely leave a thumbs up. Let me know in a comment down below what is your favorite Appalachian horror book that you've read. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!